Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I am so excited to be interviewing my friend, Kristen Willis. She is a mothering coach and an integrative health practitioner, and she has so many other amazing gifts that we're going to get into today. So I'm so excited to talk to her because you need to stay listening because no one else on the Instagram world or anywhere that I found is really doing anything remotely similar to the things that Kristen is doing. So thank you, Kristen, for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Amanda. I'm so excited to talk today.
Yes, awesome. So I, of course, love the reason behind how you got here. So before we get into like what your practice actually looks like and the gifts and the offerings that you have, tell me a little bit about how you've come to discover that you have these gifts and the passion behind why you love helping people.
Yeah. A lot of people know, if you followed me for any amount of time, I grew up as a pastor's kid. So I was very immersed in the spiritual world, but much more focused on religion than deep spirituality, having an experience that was my own. And what I noticed in that space through a lot of traumatic experiences was that the people in those spaces were some of the least healthy I had ever met. And the paradigm, or the program that I had grown up with was that this is the healthiest way to be. So there was something about me that always asked questions, so many whys. Why is this way? This shouldn't be this way. So it really became my driving urge to counter everything that I was seeing that included toxicity or attachment to old patterns. So that led me down the psychotherapy route. Through the psychotherapy route, I discovered Jungian psychology, I discovered dreamwork, and then I discovered energy and family constellations. And so they all kind of stacked into my life at the perfect time. But it was so interesting to me to see that there was sort of this liminal space between our physical issues and our emotional issues that was energetics. And no one is taught about this. And yet it's the most essential part of who we are. And so it became fascinating in my own life as I healed things energetically. Oh, physical issues started to resolve, or tension in my life and other areas disappeared. And then I really became passionate about helping other people discover this too.
Yeah. And so energy work, that's, especially coming from religion,
Yeah.
it's very frowned upon, or, witchcraft or woo-woo.
Yeah.
How did you come to peace with that when you found it? I mean, a lot of people have that revelation of like, oh, this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's a little bit of guilt or,
Yeah.
mixed emotions about it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I did experience a lot of that. And everybody's story is different. I think for me, once I realized that this is who I was designed to be and that it was really beautiful and it could help others because it was so natural and innate, it felt like a homecoming. So it felt, when someone goes, oh, I was always searching for that perfect job or whatever. Oh, I found it. And then they're great at it and everything flows. That's sort of how I felt when I discovered energetics and the spirituality to everything. And it really, the segue was initially plant medicine and being a part of an essential oil MLM and learning the energetics of these plants and how they're actually conscious. Every plant actually has an angel that is working with us and you can connect with that. That was when I was like, oh my goodness, everything in our universe has a purpose that's so much deeper than being pretty or helping with a wound or something like that. So I think it just became a deep conviction within me that was like, you know what? I don't think people are going to understand that. At some level, I'm an oldest child and was totally a people pleaser for most of my life up until like 25. That felt terrifying. And I also knew if I don't follow this, I'm I'm choosing to totally deny my calling. And so the scarier thing was to deny my calling. And so a lot of people don't get what I do. And that's, that's okay. That's not my business if they don't. But the ones who do are the ones who I love to work with, or the ones who are curious. And so I think for me, once that was discovered, it was like, yeah, I mean, I still have moments where fear pops up. Someone might not understand this, or someone might misinterpret. And I ultimately just have to surrender that because it's not my business. And everyone who is meant to work with me or, interact with me at some level does.
Yeah, very well said. And so when we talk about energy work, I
Yeah.
think like I always use my boyfriend as an example because he's like, that stuff's frou-frou. I don't get any of it.
Yeah.
What does energy work even mean? Like,
Yeah.
is
Oh
it
my goodness.
meditating? Is
Yeah.
it
Yes, everything. Um, oh, how do I answer that? To me, energy work feels like bringing awareness to the subtle parts of ourselves that we don't see. And I think that's like a big gray area for so many people. It's so non-definitive. But whenever we talk about spirituality, I've got a lot of clients who are deconstructing from religion, and so they're in this space of, I know there's something more and it feels scary. Can you help it to feel comfortable? And so the wording I use a lot is like, well, everyone's so comfortable saying spirit, spiritual, that's your energy body. So
Mhm.
it's what you can't see. We're learning it is more measurable. We used to say it's not measurable, but it really is. But it's that liminal space between your physical self and everything that lies beyond. And I'm sure you already know this statistic because we're kind of on the same vibe. But Joe Dispenza talks about the structure of our atoms is 99.79% energy. And so that tiny other part is our physical matter. So, yeah, I would just say it's everything that's unseen, and you can really only connect to it from your heart and not your brain. And our culture is so wired, even religious structures, to work based on thinking and thought. And this is what we're told, that to explore what's felt and experiential is a kind of big leap for a lot of people.
Right, yeah. Because everyone learns biochemistry in school, right? That's
Mhm.
like, we get that.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
this molecule, this hormone, this
Yeah,
nutrient, it does this. Okay,
yeah,
simple, like algebra. But then you
yeah,
get into higher levels of understanding how the body works and into bioenergetics and quantum physics. And
yeah.
this stuff definitely is coming around a little bit, but I
Yeah.
think there's also a lot of misinformation out there as well. Like I definitely follow a few people that I listen to speak, and I'm like, do I sound like this? They sound cuckoo. Like they're not making sense.
Yeah.
And what I love about you is you actually make sense. Like when you
Oh,
speak.
thank you. That means a lot. Thanks for saying that. Well, I think too,
Mhm.
because our culture, and this is something I talk about a lot in my work, our culture is so me focused. This is my body. These are my symptoms. These are my circumstances. I need to do labs. I need to do muscle testing. What are my root causes? We're very me focused, and that actually detaches us from that larger spirituality, which is, oh, we're designed connected to everything. That's how we come into this world connected. And you can use the fancy terms, quantum entanglement, or you can just say by proxy, or maybe not by proxy, but just we're innately connected to everything because we all come from one source. And you don't have to have any belief system for that to be true, but it is. And so I think that the health space right now is so me focused that when we're going, what is my root cause? And not going, oh, well, I'm a fourth generation Italian. And so when they fled, they were scared and they had to leave all their possessions behind. There was scarcity. Oh, well, does any of that mirror in the patterns my body is expressing today? Yes. But when we're so focused on labs and only healing ourselves and we're talking about all these ancient practices right now in the health space, sun, salt, minerals, grounding, they've been around forever. And I also believe the concept of unity and healing as a community, healing with awareness of a larger whole, is also how the ancients did health. And that's something we're just kind of starting to realize again. So when we talk about
Yes.
energy, I always tell my clients, if you can imagine a huge funnel above you, all of their experiences kind of come down into who you are. And then you're an expression of those. And you can bring awareness to that if you want to consciously, or you can just live your life in autopilot. Um, so yeah, that's like the most random and scattered definition of energy, but yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because we know if I eat something different, I might feel a little different. But if I also start meditating, I'm going to feel a little different. So even like people can agree on,
Yeah.
okay, yes, there's a cause and effect to how I feel, which would be my own energy,
Yes. Yes.
or when you walk into a room, the vibes are off. We can all agree that we can sense something that we just, don't
Yeah.
really have a good definition for. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the openness of what is energy work.
Yeah. And I also think, to your point, that people do realize what energy is, but because it's really not definable, they don't have a way to learn it. So what I see a lot is when I work with clients and they learn boundaries for the first time, and it's like, oh, I'm not depleted anymore, and I have all this energy and I feel more like myself. It's like, well, that's energy. Like you've learned to define your spiritual space and it's not someone else's and that you're not being pulled from anymore. Um, and I think that the beauty that I do see is happening is the health space is beginning to unite more with spirituality. So we can achieve so much deeper and longer lasting healing because we're not just staying at kind of level one of what we are, who we are.
Yeah, and there's a few examples I love to teach people about. What is her name? She wrote the book The Power of Eight. Are you familiar with her
Oh,
work?
I'm not.
So she wrote a book called The Power of Eight, where she was putting people in groups of eight, and they would set an intention together
Yeah.
each time they met,
Yeah.
and would meditate on that, pray on that, whatever, for the next like couple weeks. And
Yeah.
then they would come back and talk about like the shifts that happened between all of them.
Oh,
And I'll have to find her name. I think it's like Susan McCracken or something like that. But
that's so neat. I'm going to look that
I'll
up.
yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. And then there's the other example of people praying over like war-torn countries and seeing like changes in crime, measurable changes in crime in areas that they're, placing an intention or praying about.
Yes.
And, that is proven. So I like to give those examples for people who are kind of like, I don't know about this.
Yeah. And I always come back to you don't have to have a certain belief system. But if you
hmm
believe in a power greater than yourself, whatever that is, then you're going like, oh, there's something bigger than me. And to me,
hmm
that ability to step into hope and faith is kind of what facilitates surrender. So you can allow some of these changes to come in. I think
Yes.
energy tends to be blocked when we have so many ideas about what it has to be that it's like, oh, it titrates itself and can't reach us if we're not allowing ourselves to believe that there is a different way that might be very elusive to us and hard to
hmm
understand, but also doesn't have to be.
Yeah. And I love that you use that word surrender because so many of us are perfectionists and trying to learn everything we can, myself included, to see if I can micromanage my results. And it just doesn't work like that. The surrender
Absolutely.
is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a heart thing. I just keep coming back to the brain and the heart. And
hmm
our brains want to know results. And I've had several mentors and teachers over time that have said, hey, Kristen, you don't have to know. And there's that part of me like, but I do. And whenever I've released the knowing, or, life has done that to me where I have to release the knowing, it's amazing what can open and flow. Um, and that's to me its own practice right there. That's a lifelong.
hmm Yeah, yeah, totally understand.
Yeah.
And coming back to, let's say, like law of attraction, manifesting people,
Yeah.
um, I feel like they have a lot of good things about it, but then
Yeah.
there might be some myths that are being perpetuated in that community.
Yeah.
Could you go into maybe what some of those myths are and kind of how energy, because you just mentioned something really great, like when I let go, it allowed for other things to flow in. So I wasn't so attached to the outcome or how it was supposed to work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would say to that is there's a really great book called It's Not Your Money by Tasha Silver. And so I think it was supposed to be like an 8-month course that she boiled down into 8 weeks, and it's a book and it's amazing. But one of the things she says in so many words in the book is when you have a need for something and it has to be a certain way, you've already cut off the flow. So when you can not need it, when you can release attachment to it, that gives it space to appear. And now I realize that will probably even sound kind of elusive and woo-woo to people, like, what are you talking about? And so I guess what I would say is to manifest something requires us to cultivate a certain version of ourselves that we desire to be. So if I desire let's just use business as an example. If I'm desiring to up level my business and let's say move to 7 figures a year or something like that. And right now I'm like maybe not even at half that, but I'm like, well, that's really what I want. So if I focus on wanting it enough, isn't it going to happen? And it's not about that. It's saying, well, what does that future version of me look like? So that alone is a surrender because it's staying out of our mind into imagination and into possibilities. And so I usually encourage clients to like get really creative, start to do future self journaling or visualizations. You can purchase these, but I think it's great to figure out something yourself or be coached through it. Get some card decks and pull cards, get paint out, like whatever gets you in your creative flow to begin to say like, well, what would this version look like? Well, I would say, what does she do each morning? How does it feel when she does that? Who does she hang out with? Who are her primary influences? And you're starting to calibrate your energetic field, your spirit to include these things. And then you're visualizing it too. And so when you're doing the new practices, if I desire to be a certain body weight, but I'm like not getting off my butt each day, I'm not recalibrating my field to align with that. So to me, to manifest is to choose what is it I'm desiring to step into. I might have to do scary things. I might have to say no to certain practices in my life or behaviors or people, but that's what it would mean to create my field to be magnetic to what it is that I desire. And so then with that, whenever we make the new choices, okay, I'm going to move my body X amount of days a week, or I'm going to learn what it's like to be at peace with my checking account, or whatever that is, we are changing our energetics. And when we do that, they're favorable to the energetic of what it is that we desire. So when someone who's not willing to make changes is saying, well, I want to manifest this, how come it hasn't shown up? It's choosing to do all those things and then going, also, I'm okay if they never happen. Which is so contrary to the like desiring the thing. But to me, it's in having the willingness to do the inner work to become the version of you. And it doesn't mean it's got to happen in like 2 weeks. It's a process.
Yes.
But the more that we're willing to, it actually changes what's in our energetic field. That's why I see people who do, how come I can't find this perfect partner or spouse or whatever, or home? And then they do work on themselves and it's like, I can't believe that like they just showed up. And I'm like, well, hang on, they didn't just show up. You changed who you were. And so they could appear and be magnetic to you.
Mhm.
So does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And just like you can see other people in their toxic behaviors repeating the same patterns,
Yeah.
you can step out of that and start to attract the perfect partner, or at least someone who's going to mirror you and your level at your energy. And that's the part that's hard for people, I think, because you can't always see your own blind spots. We see the friend repeating the same patterns and we're like, why don't they get it? But
Yeah,
it's hard for us to see that a lot. So this is
absolutely.
where someone like you would come in and, have the conversations and maybe help teach people how to do some of this inner work,
Yeah.
because you can't search on Google, how do I do inner work, right? It's like,
No, I really wish you could. Yeah.
right. So what are some of your favorite ways to, when you start working with someone, to start to uncover why we're in some of these patterns that we really want to step out of?
Yeah, I like to just get a really, really thorough history and include family patterns. And initially, when I did integrative wellness and first started, it was like, oh, we need the whole history of their health and how many times they were exposed to mold, or do they sleep with Wi-Fi on, and all those things. And then I was like, I mean, it's important, and it's not like getting really deep. And so I love to explore what are emotional patterns they keep dealing with? What's something they're frustrated with? When do they feel well? And when do they feel like they're sicker? And almost always it has nothing to do with something they're taking in or a food. It has to do with behaviors, who they surround themselves with, practices, and almost always residue from family. And what's
Mm.
interesting is I shouldn't say people, Americans are really adverse to doing the family work. because we want to just be so self-sufficient and we want to keep moving forward and we can do everything ourselves. And I think for women, a mantra for a while is like, I don't need anybody. I don't need a man. I can just do everything. And that kind of cuts off the flow of that connectedness to everything that's essential. So some of the things I like to do with clients, in a one-on-one session, we will do integrative energy work and coaching. So that means me listening to them, helping observe patterns that I'm noticing and repeating that back to them. And then we'll drop into really deep the theta state. Theta healing is something I use with my clients. And then when we're in that state, just me using frequency testing or muscle testing to see, okay, the same way that we've got some great practitioners in this space that use frequency testing to test supplements, I use frequency testing to test energetic patterns. And I've developed my own proprietary system to do that. And then I really like to do constellations. And if no one is aware of what that is, family constellations is, oh gosh, it's like so many different things. It's kind of multidimensional. It is a therapeutic practice. It's a shamanic practice. It is a soul practice. And it's a quantum field practice. And when we do family constellations, it is a way that we are dropping out of our mind and ego stories, because that's kind of where a lot of it, our disorders are held, into the soul level of who we are. And what that looks like for a lot of people is not necessarily digging, which is also counter to staying in our minds. It's saying, like, oh man, I just have this back issue that's been here for so long, and I've had all these surgeries and done all this medication and physical therapy and energy work, and it's still here, Kristen. And so my mind always lights up and goes, oh, this is probably something deeper. And so when we're doing constellations work, that itself is a practice of surrender. So we can close our eyes, take a deep breath, and with intention say, I'm going to drop into the quantum field, the field of infinite love and creation. And in the quantum field is held the soul dynamic of everything that's ever happened and everything that's currently happening. So whether we have a family member that had that chronic back pain that we don't know of, or maybe someone had a back injury, or there was a crime involved, anything. And it might not even have been back pain. It could have been a withdrawal of support at some point in their lineage. When we drop into the quantum field, a good facilitator can totally surrender and be neutral and then go, oh my goodness, I see someone like 7 generations back. And then can you drop into what they're in? Oh man, it feels like someone just hit them in the back and I don't know where it came from. And my back feels hurt. And now I feel so scared and I don't have support. So we're dropping in, and in the moment, it looks like, is this for real? Like, is someone acting this out? But when you have the intention to connect at the soul level, you're connecting with whatever dynamics have to do with whatever issue you're bringing kind of to the table. And so what happens is we see that a lot of what we are struggling with is not ours. The title of Mark Wolyn's book is It Didn't Start With You. And I feel like that should be a mantra for all of life. So we see that it didn't start with us. And then we learn more about trust, or we learn more that maybe what my back needs is not another treatment or surgery or infusion. It's learning what it feels like to support myself, or to maybe be a little vulnerable and let other people support me. And maybe that fear of vulnerability isn't mine. Maybe it's because of that relative that had whatever it was happen to their back happen. So we make these insane, beautiful connections that you don't get through just talking about stuff, because we're dropping into this heart space, which is where we connect at the soul level. And so when I'm working with clients, I really like using kind of a synergy of energy work and constellations. And sometimes we're not even constellating to heal a family pattern, but there's the understanding that whatever we're dealing with in some way is related to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
so
fun.
Fascinating.
It is so fascinating. I feel like I could talk for hours just about that.
Yeah, so I have a lot of, because like I said, don't think that I'm aware of many people doing family constellation work, and even in the healing space, even with my clients, I don't oftentimes talk about generational things that have been passed down. We'll talk about attachment, and parental wounds, and things like that, and even epigenetics. But I'm not going back 7 generations usually, because I'm not typically doing a lot of energy work. Sometimes we'll do some theta healing, but I kind of take a different avenue. But so
Yeah.
back to the generational things that can get passed down. What are some of the really common patterns that you see here
Yeah.
that really show up in today's world?
Oh my goodness. Um, I really can't name like 5 patterns. It's literally
Really?
everything that we struggle with. So I'll just use common things that people desire to have healed. So
Hmm.
a lot of adults who are adopted may have a hard time seeing themselves fully or recognize themselves fully. I can say this is a trend I have seen. I can't say this is
Hmm.
all adults who are adopted or kids. Um, but what's helpful for them when we drop into the field is to see their birth mother and see their adoptive mother, and for that to be put in its place where they're able to see both and allow the flow of divine love to move through them. One of the biggest principles I'll say before I share common issues is in constellations, one of the key underlying themes is that the flow of divine love is meant to move through everything and everyone in a system. It can be a family system, it can be a body system, it can be animals, it can be a corporate system, but the flow of love is meant to flow. And so the thing that holds it up is when something doesn't belong, when it hasn't been acknowledged, and when it's not in its right order. So if you can take those principles, then anything that's occurred when those things are out of line creates kind of like a kink in the hose, if you want to think of it that way. So if we have a child who was parentified, then they were out of their divine order, which is mother or mother child, father child, instead of child father, child mother. So sometimes it's as simple in a constellation as the adult person saying to the mom, I'm the child and you are my mother. And sometimes when that happens in the constellation, the mother's like, no, I'm the child and you're the mother. So it may take some, and one of the biggest things is also no fixing. So you're there, oh man, it looks like mom doesn't know how to say she's the mom. But when we see that, it's like, oh, now when that child, if it finally loosens up in the field enough that the mother can go, oh, you are the child and I'm the mother, afterward they'll be like, oh my goodness, I feel such a relief. I never knew I always had carried this responsibility. I'm not the mother, I'm the kid. So we see body aches diminish, we see people able to sleep again. Scarcity issues are huge with generational because we've got persecution, racism, immigration, the Great Depression, wartime, and we tend to think, oh, 7 generations back. We're talking sometimes lifetimes back and centuries back. I had someone once who had chronic throat issues, and they had a relative that was hung at the Blair Witch trial. Like, well, who would ever say that's on a lab? And so when they were able to just see the other person and say, like, I see your heavy fate, their throat stuff went away because they were just able to acknowledge that person's hard, life ending and acknowledge, like, that's actually not mine. When people over carry responsibilities, a huge issue with that is often generational. And people just, we see in family dysfunction, no one ever carrying their own stuff or parents projecting onto their kids or, generationally that happening. So a very profound thing for people is when they have a constellation saying, I carry what's mine to carry and you carry what's yours to carry. And that can be a huge physical relief, and certainly an emotional relief. Career issues, when someone cannot step into their calling or they're just kind of running in circles because they want to explore who they really are, that a lot of the time has to do with father wounding and not being in alignment with father line. Father line is all about achievement and how we're seen in the world, how we're perceived, and how we accomplish. Mother side of the line has a lot to do with how we nurture, how we receive. And so when I see any set of issues that has to do with that, if someone's having prominent left-sided issues, okay, what's going on with your ability to receive in mother line? Because left side of the body is feminine. Right side of the body and, aimlessness, we can see chronic shame being related to generational patterns. Think of any projected emotions, and they almost always go way far back. Addiction is huge, helping people find freedom from addiction. That addiction, as you know, almost always is never about the substance, but is about trying to quell something or meet some sort of need for comfort and safety. So when we go way far back to the generations where things were unstable or they were I had someone once with a constellation that was during the Dust Bowl. okay, that's kind of a time of extreme unsafety and, times of famine. It can go way back to ancient history. So it's very fascinating. It's never expected, but it's every common health issue we have now. And then it can also just be like recurrent dental issues and looking at
Mhm.
meridian systems. I had a client that wanted to constellate their liver, and we did that. And there were all sorts of cool generational things going on. So just knowing, one of my mentors taught us that everything is first spiritual before it becomes physical. And that's how we are. We're spiritual beings in physical bodies. So when we want to trace an issue, like of course run the labs, of course eat healthy, of course get morning sun, and know that the greater imbalance that we can just look at is the spiritual. And it's also where we find amazing healing and miracles and gifts that we didn't have. It's not just to root out imbalances and things that might be disordered.
Mhm. Yeah. Lots of fascinating stuff you brought up. So you brought up father wounding, mother wounding, and I mentioned, or you mentioned before that you are a mothering coach. Why have you chosen that path as opposed to maybe like the father wound or something else?
Yeah. The mother wound is a really prominent part of my healing journey. And so for me, coming from that religious upbringing and generations of mothers who were longing to be held in a healthy way. My goal, I have two daughters, was to be connected to my own resourced nature and to be connected to healthy mothering so that I could break the patterns that came before me. And so, because it's been such a huge part of my life, as I did this, I realized most women that I meet have never known how to meet themselves and mother themselves in a healthy way. And most women that I work with have not been mothered in a healthy way. And so I think it comes back. It's got deeper roots to like connecting to divine feminine, to the feminine nature of God or the universe. Um, Feminine and masculine, there's a balance, but we've really only been taught about that masculine side. And I think for a lot of women, there's never been permission to surrender into softness, to move a little bit slower, to not have to hustle. And so seeing this in myself and healing, and then moving into having a private practice and being like, oh, holy crap, it's not just me. It's like most women I work with. I realized if we're going to shift future generations and nurture them well, we have to learn how to heal this in ourselves and nurture ourselves well before we go out into whatever our creative pursuits are. And so it just really became a passion at that point.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that as well. And I think it's partly just the past 50, 60 generations or 50, 60 years
Yeah.
of cultural shifting into feminism. And then, the 90s being all about the hustle culture and
Yeah.
also women as sexual objects. And then
Yeah.
women can do everything, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we really moved away from, 200 years ago, what were women doing? What were their superpowers? And how can we maybe integrate more of that into who we are now and shift things a little bit?
Yeah, and that's where I love constellations for, it's called resourcing. So we
Mhm.
often use constellations to ease tension in the field with a pattern, and we can use constellations to find our resourcing. So while we have this blip of our last most memorable 100 years as Americans has been super jacked up in terms of the messaging we've been sent. When I look at the commercials for women over the past 100 years, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, is this real life? Like, would we ever do this to men? No. And then when we go back even more, like there's definitely a primitive phase of our history, whether that's in America or elsewhere. And when we realize that we're quantum beings, so we also have a history that's like lifetimes long, there were really wise cultural groups and civilizations that honored women. And when we look at
Mhm.
indigenous people, they had a lot of female leaders and they really honored the intuition of women. There's another, I guess it would just be a culture or a group off of Cyprus, like near Malta, that was a matriarchal island that was just I just think of Wonder Woman and I'm like, is that what it was like? And so when we drop into a constellation, we can say, okay, I really want to step into who I am as a woman so that I can launch this new venture, so that I can nurture my children well and nurture myself well. Okay, well, who can we connect with that's a resource? And so we can also connect back to both men and women who honored the feminine. And there was a healthy honoring of masculine, not just everything being so patriarchal.
Mhm.
So I love that too, because we have both that we can tap into really easily.
Yeah, I love the concept of resourcing as well. Um, just in general, like even thinking in your own recent, like maybe grandmothers or grandfathers that have passed away,
Yeah.
and the wisdom that they brought, and being able to tap into that. And that's something that I have been practicing, and I kind of love to bring that in for people too.
Yes. Yes. 100%. I love to call it gifts of the ancestors because I think
Yeah.
so much of us is like, okay, what did they do wrong that we have to, heal? And it's like, well, wait a
Yeah.
minute. There are a lot of really wise ancestors. When I started to do integrative health work, I would notice like, I think there's somebody in my family line that like has all these skills. And then I did homeopathy and I was like, hang on, my great grandfather studied medicine in New York and went to the school that was the school of homeopathic medicine. And I
Oh.
was like, hang on, when I'm doing this stuff, like I have that DNA, I have those epigenetics that are also like, that's why this is so easy. Oh, this is why this is so fun. This is
Yeah.
why this flows. And so I love realizing that instead of our constant root cause fixation, it's like there's also root wellness and there's root vibrance. So
Mhm.
what if we can, and that requires surrender too, because sometimes we want to fix, that can be a perpetual thing. So also just saying like, oh, who might I be connected to that is also like through the generations sending me support.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up homeopathy. So obviously in your sessions you do energy work, and muscle testing,
Yeah.
but with homeopathy, that's also a form of energy medicine as well.
Yeah.
Also something a lot of people don't understand or they poo-poo. Can you talk a little bit more how homeopathy can be beneficial and supportive for the energy body?
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone is not aware, and I may butcher the way I describe this, but I'll try my best to be eloquent. Homeopathy, in essence, is taking something. So, say we have a lavender plant. We would take the lavender plant and then grind it with sugar pellets. And we would keep grinding it over and over and over, and then diluting until there was nothing left of the lavender and it was just our sugar pellets. That's like a really bastardized version of what it is. And so, with the different dilutions, you create what are called potencies. And so, the smallest potency, meaning the least diluted, would be like in the C remedies, like 30C, 200C, and those potencies work primarily at the physical level. And then the more diluted it gets, which means the even less of the actual substance that is in there, it gets into higher level potencies, which are called megapotencies. So that would be like 1M, 10M, 50M, and then it keeps going higher. There's like MM, LM, CM. And the more diluted it gets when you go into those M's, it actually works at a deeper energetic level and it actually can help clear and resolve ancestral issues. And I was talking, this is like a fun geek out. I think you would enjoy, Amanda. I was talking to a friend recently and we were saying like the C potencies aren't cutting it for a lot of stuff anymore. People are needing M's. And I'm like, well, no kidding. Our collective is healing some big stuff. So, of course, we're needing it at those deeper levels. So, the way homeopathy can assist with someone's healing journey and their energy body is it can bring in that thing that is out of alignment by actually bringing in the thing that causes the same energetic sine wave or vibration as what it is that you're dealing with. So, a really great example is Quercus, which is a tree remedy. I believe it's oak. And so, in these times where things feel like, whoa, what's going on? We really need a sense of groundedness. And so, when we're literally taking the energy of the oak tree, um, it helps us to have that like persona of like, wait a minute, I'm not shakable. I can stay nice and steady. That's like not only just within me, and it's hitting those deeper levels of my ancestry where they felt that too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing about homeopathy and energetics. It's so subtle that if you don't take time to notice it, then you don't notice it. But as you're taking these remedies, when you can do it with intention, you're healing those generations before you. You're helping
Mm-hmm.
those patterns, even though they're not alive to say, oh, that feels so much better,
Right.
picking that up, and you're easing the DNA within you. So if you do ever have kids, for whoever wants to have children, like you're also healing that in your own DNA. So it's pretty beautiful.
Yes, that is so beautiful. And, you talk about past generations, but myself and a lot of people that I've worked with also have noticed even changes in their family systems or their partners by them just doing the work. And then
Yeah.
they start to notice, well, the people in my family didn't change at all. They didn't go to therapy. They didn't do this energy work.
Yeah.
Why do I see healing in the people around me?
Yeah.
And part of that is what you're talking about, that quantum entanglement that
Yeah.
some people will say, like, we're connected through energy cords,
Yeah.
and just you shifting your energy will also affect the people in your home, in your business, in your everything.
Yeah, 100% yes. And Bert Hellinger, that's the founder of Family Constellations, even though I believe it is so much older than him, he kind of like gave it the name and put it into practice. He
Mm-hmm.
talks a lot about the soul of the family. And so that's what he would call the energy field that is your whole family. So even though we all have our own energy fields that look like a little bubble around us, a family is the series of all the energy bubbles together. And he acknowledged, and this practice acknowledges that women are actually the energetic gatekeepers of the family soul. So we have this profound ability to hold space for these things. And so when we do heal, it recalibrates that whole bubble that we're surrounded with and the other family bubbles that are connected to that outwardly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's
And
empowering.
yeah. And so when you're working with someone and let's just say they've come to you because they're desperate,
Hmm.
they're in this, like, I have to heal. I'm, losing money. I feel like I'm going to die. They're really, really struggling. They're in crisis.
Yeah.
Is that a good time to do this type of work? Or is there like an order of operations that you might take someone through?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question so much. Yes. So I would say it depends on their willingness. One of the things I have in my energy system, it's called the light body alignment method, is the first page is just a diagnostic. So when we're
Mhm.
looking at that, there are key beliefs I muscle test before we do anything, which the first one is um, I test their name. Like you probably do this with theta. Like, are they even themselves? Or are they like all over the place in someone else's energy? So like, let's just make sure they're here. And then when they're desperate to heal, I also muscle test. It's beautiful to be victorious in my life, or I am victorious in my life. Do they subscribe to that? If they are really in a victim pattern, then it will be, I mean, we can always do constellations work, but to me, that's where the subconscious is something I work on first if they're stuck
Mhm.
in a victim pattern. And then I always muscle test. I believe in miracles. Do they believe in miracles? Do they believe in the work that they've come to me for? You wouldn't believe. I'm sure you have this too, where people come to you wanting to heal and they're like, I don't even think I think this is real, but they're at least fix me.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
Yes.
we've got to make sure we can get in there first. So that's when, if there are enough of those, I go, okay, we need to work on just like clearing their field a little, maybe unlayering and aligning some of their beliefs, see how they feel after a first session. And then when they come back, are they muscle testing differently? And so that's kind of my first order of operations is where are they aligned to themselves and how well can they see if they're so stuck in fight or flight or so stuck in overthinking, then constellations may be too deep for them.
Mhm.
And you can't mess up constellations. So they could still be, it would still have an impact. But the idea is what is their body ready for? And so I always ask after I muscle test the things I mentioned, does their body want to, how does their body want to resolve it today? And then I muscle test, do they want to do physical work, emotional clearing, energetic clearing, or ancestral and constellations? Or I have a little box, refer to someone else. And then I just humbly after a session might say, I think you might need to work with somebody else. And that's kind of rare, but it's happened before. So I just
Mhm.
use a process of elimination to see where they are and see what their body is ready for. Because you know as well as I, if the body isn't ready, we can't push it in a certain direction. And it's kind of the same way spiritually too.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've worked with people who would say they're sensitive to energy work even, and like, I don't want to do any of the techniques or energy work. Can we just talk for a while?
Yeah.
Because they are so sensitive to even just slight changes in their
Yeah.
internal environment or
Yeah.
energy body.
Yeah.
If someone comes to you and they're in that boat, which unfortunately I feel like we're seeing more and more people
Yeah.
in that highly sensitive group, is that something that you would maybe start with something else, or would you still go into energy work?
Yeah, so what I would do for that is, yeah, you know as well as I how profound it can be to just do a few downloads or something like that. Um, so what I would do for that is just, to me, that's a scream for safety. Like their body just needs to feel safe. So I'll
Mhm.
just tell them, hey, here's what I usually do. Do you have any questions? How does that sound to you today? And it sounds like your body just really might need to feel safe. And people vacillate between, I don't want it to be too much. And like, but how much can we
Yeah.
do today? Can we squeeze it in 5 visits? And I'm like, let's not have that goal, please. And so I will get them, if it's in person, get them on the table. If it's over the over Zoom, like you lay down somewhere calm where you can just hear me. And then I will just clear their field really gently, because a lot of times what is keeping them feeling unsafe is stuff. It could be an entity attachment, it could be cords from somebody else where they're picking up too much. And I ground them. So first I just really work on energetically. Let's imagine putting roots down together. So if I can get them connected to visualization, then they're actually the one doing the work. I'm just holding space. So we imagine
Mhm.
roots. Okay, imagine your roots going to the center of the earth, and then we imagine divine light coming into them. And usually at that point, it's like, oh, I feel so calm. I feel really okay, good. And then I just do some really basic downloads, and I can even send them to you if you want for the show notes. And they are, I am safe, I'm loved, I'm accepted, I'm supported, I'm heard, I'm held, I'm seen, I'm understood, I'm known, I'm present, I'm divinely accompanied, I'm cherished, I'm treasured, I know my worth, and I belong. I've got them memorized because I do them every session. And
Yeah.
and sometimes someone who is so dysregulated can receive only those. And I've had that happen a couple times where they're like, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "We literally just grounded you, called in light, and did," I call them the basics, and did the basics. And that may be all that they can handle for the day to just feel calibrated.
Mhm.
So that's generally what I do. And then always keep checking in. How are you feeling right now? If they're feeling good and calm, then that's great. And just move very slowly.
Mhm. Yeah, very wise.
Well, you and I've
And
seen what happens when we don't. Yeah.
right, yeah, and it's crazy. Like I might just personally attract people that are dealing with very hypersensitivities, but I just feel like it's most of the people that I've worked with in the last year.
Yeah.
Like it's gaining, um, unfortunately, but also on the note of shifting in the collective, I
Mhm.
feel like we were so disconnected that that might also be a reason why so many people are hypersensitive now. Like we're all having to learn what it feels like to be in our body and how to respect our boundaries. And
Yes.
sometimes the journey sucks. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when someone is so depleted, both energetically, emotionally, and from a nutritional and mineral standpoint, then it's almost like an energetic autoimmune situation that presents where energetically everything is reactive and energetically
mm,
everything is too much. So I always come back to safety and vulnerability. Like, oh, it sounds like maybe it wasn't safe to be vulnerable. No, how did you know that? And then we get into
yeah.
more discussions. So it's almost showing them, I feel like, because our energy body enters the room, that's why we get like, oh, it doesn't feel good in here. This vibe is off. It's like, well, duh, our energy field enters the room before we do. I almost feel like when we're working with a new client, their energy field needs to know, like, okay, you're a safe person to work with. I think I can vibe out. And then usually after a session or two, we're really rocking and rolling. But it sometimes takes that initial, like, what do you feel like? And that's why I think
Hmm.
like slow and gentle is kind of the way to go.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
agreed. And so, on a more positive note, spontaneous healings. I have met a few people who've experienced spontaneous healings. You've heard about them on the internet.
Mhm.
Have you personally seen spontaneous healings or experienced them yourself?
I have experienced them with clients. I've experienced some gradual healings But with clients I have, and I had one recently, and this person shared, and it was just after one session, and we talked a lot about it. And I said to them, they kept saying, like, this was so amazing. I said, well, you were like, when I went into their field, they were so ready to heal. They were
Hmm.
completely out of victimhood, and they were doing inner work. And so when other people heard about their healing, it was like, well, I want this, what this person had. And I was like, well, I can't share confidential details, of course, with them, but it's like, okay, well, also really depends on where you are. How willing are you to go deep, and how willing are you to explore yourself and to meet the uncomfortable things? And more, what I see the recipe is for spontaneous healing is it's surrender, it's willingness to be seen, it's willingness to be healed. A lot of people are not willing to be healed, and they don't know it because it's so deeply subconscious. And it's like ready to move on. And this person had all those things in place. And so they went from pretty intense pain to it was just gone. And so I was even like, wait, what happened? Oh, that was really cool. So it's really neat to witness that. And I've had a couple other clients have like, oh, this was just gone after this session. So yeah, it is neat to see. It's a reminder to me, of course, that it works. And sometimes when you're in it all the time, you forget like, oh yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, I've definitely worked with a few people who like 3 sessions, they had just gotten the hang of it and they were like, we're good. I get it now. It's clicked.
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm a whole new person now. And it's pretty
100%.
incredible because you're like, I definitely am not doing this. Like that was all you. This was
Yes. Yes. And
this.
that's what I keep coming back to. Like, we're just the facilitators. I'm just the
Right.
bridge that's helping you to connect to what you're
Hmm.
willing to connect. But when people are really willing to step out of victimhood and they believe in the method and they're like, oh, I'm ready to be well. I always talk because I work so much. I'm in the Bible Belt. So lots of people at various stages of their religious journey. I always say, like, when Jesus healed people, he was like, pick up your mat and walk. He didn't just go like, woo, peace out, and then walk away. Like, they had instructions. So to be well is to also like it's also an action. It's not just a state of being. It's like, oh, to be well, I need to now not be in this old loop again. And I need to know that I have power to heal. And so I don't ever want to tell someone, I don't think this will work for you. And I want to
Hmm.
say, like, hey, this is what I see commonly with people who do really well with this kind of healing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times it can be like these things are so layered, right? And even when I think of the lens of neuroscience, we have these trauma clusters, and so many thoughts or triggers or tracks will lead to this cluster. And sometimes doing this work is like going to like brush brush out this big giant knot that is the trauma cluster. And
Yeah.
sometimes it could be like, oh, I just needed to pull this one string and it evaporated. And sometimes we have to start, I always use the analogy brushing the hair, like we have to start at the bottom and
Yes.
something might get better and then something else might get better. You wouldn't just start up here and just start ripping.
Yeah. I love that you use that analogy, and that made me think of something else that's so important. You and I have seen in this health space a lot of mold sickness, and I
Hmm.
don't want to keep moving into a moldy home, and why do I keep attracting these homes? And something that was so neat that I discovered after my mold healing journey was our neurology creates thought fields. There's a whole field of energy called thought field science or thought field therapy, which is about how what we think about creates a field, which kind of goes to your point talking about every groups of people praying and then something having a desired outcome. So with this, what I notice is when someone is chronically ill and they're in a loop with it, and I've been in loops before too, so I'm not dogging on anybody, but when they're in a loop with this and it's like, I can't get out of this, their neurology is in the field with whatever the thing is that they're desiring to release. So whether it's their chronic pain or their autoimmune or their mold, the neurology and what they're thinking about constantly has a space in the quantum field that it keeps tracking with. So when they continue to have the old results, I mean, you and I know when we do the theta healing work, it's like, oh, yeah, the same things keep coming up again because this is what we're not believing. But what happens when people have that surrender and the leap is it not only creates new neural pathways, but it creates a connection to a new place in the quantum field, which has the differed outcome. So what I often try to emphasize with people who are stuck in a chronic loop with whatever that thing is, a relationship or a situation or health ailment, is like, well, what are you thinking about all the time? Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts like? Well, what if you created a new outcome? And it's miraculous the way it works. And a fun little geeky fact about mold is an organism that works in colonies and systems. So it's always pinging for another system to connect with because they're spore colonies. They want to connect and they want to, put out more spores. So they're especially tricky because when you're near any other mold, they're putting out energetic signaling to connect to the
Mm,
mold because that's
interesting.
how they work. They work in a network.
Yeah. And we think of that in mushrooms, like the mycelium that goes
Exactly.
into the ground, but even your house mold is doing that apparently.
Yep. Unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. That's really fascinating. Yeah, I remember when I was at my worst and I realized I'm thinking about my skin, aka the problem, 100% of my waking life. Like, no
Yeah.
wonder I'm not getting better. No wonder this is so hard. I
Yeah.
have to start figuring out how to think about something else,
Yeah.
how to step out of this loop
Mm.
and start to attract or at least get on the right path to start healing.
Yes, totally. I've been there too.
Yeah.
After you get out of it, it's the worst because everything's moldy.
Yeah, I'm in South Florida, so it's
Yeah,
like, and I don't even think about molds anymore.
I don't
Like,
even.
tell that to me 5 years ago. Like, you'll never think about this again.
Yeah, I love it. It says a lot to the work you've done.
Yes. And also, I like to tell people I'm also in the same apartment, like we just talked about before we started. This apartment was not moldy, but my boyfriend did bring all his moldy stuff into this apartment when he moved in with me. And I didn't have to get rid of everything. Did it elongate the suffering? Maybe a little bit, but it was either that or what we move into the desert in a tent like some people do. And
Yeah,
that was the paradigm back then when I was getting sick is you have to get rid of everything or you'll never heal.
I did. It
And
was pretty expensive.
yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people can constellate mold too if they're just really, I think the thing I like about energy work can feel very passive. Like they're coming to
Mhm.
me, I'm helping them. I'm still telling them what I'm doing the whole time. Okay, you're muscle testing for it's safe to be me or it's safe to be in my body. And then let's bring the download in, which if someone doesn't know what download is like bringing in an alignment. If you go to the chiropractor, they're getting your discs aligned and bringing in alignment is bringing truth into your body because at that moment your body's not believing it. But um yeah, when people get in the field with mold, instead of just having a passive download come in or an alignment, then they're in there with it. So they're like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, it just wants to be seen. Okay, well, can you say I see you to the mold? Oh, that feels really scary. Well, you could just say, you've been scary to look at. Oh, yeah, I can say that. Oh, you've been scared. So what's so interesting, and the analogy is when there's tension in the field, we feel tension. And so we don't go to do constellations to fix but the desire is to help love flow. So by
Mhm.
proxy, that means we release tension. And so if I'll use my shirt as an example. If I'm in the field here and there's mold and I'm like, oh, I never want to be near this. This is so scary. Like, look at this tension. And then when I can just go like, oh, I see you. It's like, oh, this eases. And like, we've got room to move and flow. I think
Mhm.
when people realize that and that you can literally constellate anything at all, whether it's your dental infection or mold or, your great grandmother's persecution or something like that, it's like, oh, and then they are the active participant. So I really love that because it's so empowering. And energy work
Yeah.
is great too, but when they can all kind of dovetail together, it puts people back in their own power and their awareness of what part of them also may have contributed to where they are. And I think
Mhm.
ownership is a huge piece that's important.
Yeah. Big fan of that radical responsibility. What part am I playing in my own suffering?
Yeah.
And like you've said several times, stepping out of victimhood and this is happening to me
Yeah.
versus I'm empowered and I can actually change it.
Yeah. 100%.
So I would love to know, what does your day look like? What is your routine? What is your spiritual practice? Do you like sit and just stay connected to source all day, or are you a regular person?
I'm pretty regular. If I wasn't a mom, I probably would be like a hermit, but Some days I would like that and some days I wouldn't. So my days that I'm home, I've got kids that I homeschool and they do like a school part-time. So the days that they're in their school, I usually see clients. And so I desire to just get morning sun every day, no matter what it is, but it depends on what my client load looks like for the day. And on days that I'm home and it's a little slower, I get morning sun first thing and listen to a hypnosis track from a dear friend of mine. And then maybe listen to a meditation. I just muscle test myself. Okay, what do I need today besides sun? And it might not be any of those things, but it's always sun, it's always nature. And then I usually work on myself spiritually and just do a check in like, how am I feeling today? How did I sleep? I write down dreams that I've had because they're wildly telling with what's going on subconsciously with me. And then I usually do energy work on myself. And I have alarms for myself throughout the day for like other sits, even if that's just coming into my office real quick and pulling a card. Okay, this is a message I need to hear today. But if I don't do the alarms, I don't have any touch-ins because life gets kind of wild with kids.
Yes. I
But
love
yeah,
that you said alarms. I do that as well.
have
It's
to.
necessary.
Yeah, and I don't always follow my own alarm, so I'm going to just be human and say that.
Yeah.
But my desire is if I don't have some touch in throughout the day for my own self accountability, then, I would just be like in la la land, like, woo, it's so fun to do energy work with people and do constellations. And so it's like, it's just important for me to be grounded and also be real with like, where am I? Like, okay, do I need to take another day off this month and maybe nurture myself more? Or just being very realistic with where I am too. And that comes
Hmm.
from a lifetime of being like an overdoer. So I'm leaning into doing a lot less these days.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the vibe I'm getting from everyone is we're
Yeah,
not doing that anymore. We're doing a lot
no.
less.
And it's amazing. The world doesn't fall apart when you stop.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you brought up dreams. I know this is a huge topic and we've already been chatting for a while, but me and my best friend, we've been best friends since we were two.
Okay.
So going on 37, 38 years now. We have been in the practice of remembering and telling each other our dreams since we were little. And
Oh, that's
so each morning, we don't live near each other, but we'll text each other every morning. Like, this was my dream. This was my dream. And I, I cannot even begin to describe how happy I am that we kept that practice because your dreams give you so much information, like you mentioned. Do you use somebody's dreams at all when you're working with them, or do you have any resources for people to maybe read a little bit more into the meaning of dreams besides just like dreamdictionary.com?
yeah. Yeah, I learned dreams through Toko Pa Turner. And she wrote the book Belonging, which is also about working with your dreams. So I think that's a great intro for people who haven't worked with dreams. And then when I teach dream work, we talk about how the meaning is what pings for you first. So
Hmm.
if I was like, oh, eagle always means flying above, blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, that's great. That is true. And when you felt the eagle in your dream, what did that feel like? And then the other thing to remember is every single part of the dream is a part of the dreamer. So it's actually they're all aspects of you. So
Hmm.
instead of it being like, oh, there's a big flood, so I guess it's going to rain soon, or there's going to be a flood, it's like, wait a minute, what does water represent? And so that's a whole other can of worms, but it's like, how do we connect with symbolism? And water can mean emotions, and it can also mean your femininity. So how did that feel for you when it came up? Like, how are you connecting with those
Hmm.
things in yourself? So to me, it's like, oh, that takes it so much deeper when it's all bits of ourselves. But there's a really good book, I think I've got it over there, called The Secret Language of Signs by Denise Lynn. It's like a good intro. It's not super in depth, but if someone just needs to whet their appetite a little bit. And then there's a website that's like Spirit Totems when you've got animals that is really great. It's in depth
Hmm.
for animal stuff. And then also you can use like some mystic practices. And if you don't know a dream image and you have card decks, you can just say like, hey, God, source creator, show me what the eagle meant in my dream. And like, oh, okay. Like, oh, it meant
Interesting.
liberation, or oh, it meant like zooming out and seeing a different view.
Mhm.
So there's so many different ways to decode our dreams too. So you can get really creative.
Awesome. Yeah, I will look those books up for sure.
Yeah.
And what about lucid dreaming? Like one of the things that my best friend and I practice is let's meet each other in our dreams. And We've done it before, and we have like a spot that we always meet at in our psyche.
Yeah. So I will just start and say that like that's pretty darn advanced. Most people are not doing that.
Right, right.
So lucid dreaming, I'd say, is kind of uncommon, and like it's a whole other branch of dream work where you really have to cultivate your spiritual connection. So to me, it says a lot about your connection with your friend that you can choose to do that and then consciously do it. But for most people, it takes a cultivation of their spiritual selves to even get to that level.
Yeah.
But I mean, everything works with intention. It's also not like, whoa, we've got to reach
Yeah.
this major point of achievement and then I can have lucid dreams. You can also just set
Right.
intentions. So, okay, my intention tonight is to like go to this place. And, it's like a muscle. The more you work with it, the more it grows. So it's not a one-time thing. But I think that's
Right.
amazing. I don't hear that very often at all.
Yeah, well, like I said, we've been doing it for like 38 years now. So
Why? You guys
we've,
your fields are entrained with each other.
yes, definitely. And it doesn't work every time. It's not like it's like, okay, tonight we're going to do it and it works, but it's worked a few times. So I think that that's a win.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah, that intention is so important. Like I love true crime, and I'm sure a lot of other people do. And sometimes after I watch it and I'm about to go to bed, I'm like, I better switch like what I'm thinking about and set some sort of intention before I fall asleep. Because if
Yeah.
I forget sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes my dreams are a little messed up, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, really should maybe stop the
Yeah.
true crime for a couple days.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I could talk to you for probably another hour, but I'm gonna
Yes,
respect your time.
absolutely.
So many fascinating things that you are doing and teaching about. Tell everyone where we can find you and how they can work with you if they're interested.
Yeah. So my website is kristenwillis.org. And that has all my current offerings right now. The ways that I'm working with people are one-on-one visits. I still do. And I'm encouraging people to join some of my group offerings. They're really robust and fun, and they're an affordable way to work with me. So the first is called the Mother Well Wisdom Collective. And it's a monthly membership group where we have a prompt for each month, plant medicine for each month. We do a group constellation together, and then you receive resources, creative prompts, and intuitive practices for you to do. And then the expanded one-on-one version of that is Mother Well One-on-One coaching immersion, which is a 4-month container of a really deep journey into yourself and how to become really resourced as a woman in whatever it is you do, whether it's creativity, whether it's the business world and your career, or it's actual mothering. It's searching in yourself using creative techniques and intuition, learning dream work, constellations, energy body awareness, and things like that, subconscious awareness. So that's super fun. And then at the end of the year, I'm going to be launching a constellation school. So we'll start with a 6-month immersion with people really committed to this work. And then after that, there will be a 1-year mentorship to become a constellations facilitator.
Wow, so exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
And so can anyone join the Constellations Academy, or do you have to have prior training in anything?
No prior training. The 6-month immersion is going to be kind of the prerequisite to if somebody wants to do facilitator training. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you
Kristen,
for having me.
yes, thank you so much for bringing all of your wisdom to the podcast. And I'm so excited to dive a little deeper into some of these resources you've given us. Thank you for so much for being such a wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Amanda. It's been an honor.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.